Good day, everyone. Welcome to my virtual class. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. I am Dr. Ana Belen Ignacio Alenzuela, an associate professor in the departments of biochemistry and nutrition and obstetrics and gynecology of the Far Eastern University, Dr. Nicanor Reyes Medical Foundation. For those of you who are seeing me for the first time, I have been in biochemistry for the longest time. You will see me in first year. You will see me in second year when you take physiologic obstetrics. You'll also see me in third year when you take gynecology and in clinical nutrition. You'll see me in fourth year when you go through clinical clerkship because I'm an OBGYN, I am a reproductive medicine specialist, and I am a minimally invasive gynecologic surgeon. And finally, you will also see me in postgraduate internship. And luckily, if you go into OBGYN residency, you will still see me. Today, we will talk about signal transduction. These are our learning objectives. At the end of the course, you should be able to understand the hormone regulated physiologic processes that will take place in response to the stimulus, the hormone release, signal generation, and effector response. You should be able to describe as well the receptors, the G proteins, and the second messengers. You must be able to appreciate the complex patterns of signal transduction pathway crosstalks. There are certain protein ligands, protein proteins, protein post-translational modification, and protein DNA interactions, and these will play a role in mediating the hormone-directed physiologic response. And after understanding all of this, you should be able to identify potential drug target development, which will have a key role in the regulation of physiology. Now, class, let me ask you, who among you knows about signal transduction? The concept of signal transduction was first introduced to you when you talked about immunochemistry. You know, the human immune response is so amazing. It involves several cells, including the macrophages, the T cells, and the B lymphocytes. Now, it is important that these cells communicate. Why? Because when a pathogen enters the human body, this has to be stopped. Let's take the COVID-19 virus, for example. This COVID-19 virus, once inside the pulmonary system, will be sensed by the pulmonary macrophages. And these macrophages will engulf this virus so that they can destroy it. Now, in the process, if they are not able to destroy it, then several particles of this virus will have to be processed by the said macrophage. Thus, the macrophage becomes the antigen processing cell, and it exposes several processed particles in its surface to call on some other cells. Now, these macrophages will now be sending signals. The signals that it will send will be cytokines. These cytokines, ladies and gentlemen, will call on other macrophages away from the pulmonary system so that they can go to the pulmonary system and help the macrophages there combat the virus. Now, these cytokines, after being received by the macrophages, will now bring the other macrophages towards the macrophage or the antigen processing cell so that they can kill the virus. So that's wonderful. That's why in COVID-19 infections, we are scared of cytokine storms because these cytokines will come increasingly so that there would be more and more macrophages to combat the COVID-19 infection. Now, there would also be other communications for the other cells, the T cells and the B cells, the lymphocytes. Therefore, these cytokines will also travel into the lymphatic system so that they will be able to reach the lymphocytes. The lymphocytes will then be activated. And these cytokines, sometimes interleukins, will also be released. And when these macrophages are attacked or helped by the lymphocytes, these lymphocytes will now transform. Again, how does transformation happen? There will be ligand receptor interaction, the ligand being the piece of the bacteria, and once there is ligand receptor interaction, the T helper cells will now be activated. And it can also activate the B lymphocytes. And when the B lymphocytes are activated, antibodies are formed against these antigens. So, ladies and gentlemen, the concept of signal transduction is not new to you. We need some signal transduction so that cells can communicate with each other and so that cells can tell the neighboring system what to do. The only difference is that most of the time signal transduction is used by hormones, whereas in inflammation, these are used by your inflammatory cells. So in signal transduction, we will have a physiologic response. And the physiologic response will happen after hormone and receptor interaction. So after reception of the stimulus, there will be several signals that will be processed so that cellular responses are activated so that we can have physiologic response. So, hormone receptor interaction will generate intracellular signals, and these signals, number one, will regulate activity of genes. And when we regulate the activity of genes, then certain proteins will be produced. Second, this hormone receptor interaction will affect the activity of specific proteins like the enzymes, transporters, or channel proteins. Most of the time, these enzymes or these proteins will be phosphorylated. And once they are phosphorylated, they will be activated. Hormone receptor interaction will also influence location of the proteins in the cell. These proteins may be translocated from the cytoplasm into the nucleus. And finally, hormone receptor interaction will generate several processes such as protein synthesis, cell growth, and replication after a gene is activated. Therefore, transcription, translation, physiologic response will happen. Is this important to me, Dr. Alenzuela? Do I need it to become a doctor? My response is yes. Let's take diabetes mellitus, for example. Now, patients with diabetes can either have no insulin or with insulin. The beta cells of the islets of Langerhans responds to hyperglycemia by secreting insulin. Therefore, it is necessary for us to have insulin so that in the hepatocyte, this insulin will promote glycogenesis. So, as I have mentioned, we must understand how insulin works. Insulin will first be released by the pancreas, then it will attach to the receptor and it will allow glucose in so that glycogenesis will happen. Now, when patients have diabetes type 1, they don't secrete insulin. Therefore, the treatment is give them insulin. Whereas in diabetes type 2, they do have insulin. There is a receptor, but the insulin receptor interaction does not allow glycogenesis to happen. So you should know which one is the one that's effective so that you can treat your patients. So again, we said there should be recognition of the stimulus. That is the most important step. After the stimulus is recognized, then the hormone will be released. And once the hormone is released, signal transduction will happen and we can have the physiologic effects. Okay, so there are two groups of hormones. We have the group 1 hormones and the group 2 hormones. The group 1 hormones are the steroid hormones or your lipophilic hormones. And because they are lipophilic, they can traverse the plasma membrane. Therefore, the hormone receptor complex per se is the one that will stimulate gene transcription, translation, physiologic response. These hormone receptor complexes will also activate transporter channels. On the other hand, group 2 hormones are hydrophilic hormones. Being hydrophilic, the receptors are located in the plasma membrane, and therefore it will generate several signals or it will use second messengers so that physiologic response can happen. Protein modification by adding a phosphate group, protein translocation from the cytoplasm into the nucleus, opening of transport channels, and just like the hormone receptor complexes in group 1 hormones, it can also use second messengers that will activate gene transcription. So we would like to talk about the group 1 hormones first. Again, the lipophilic hormones, being lipophilic, can traverse the plasma membrane, which is a bilipid layer. It will find its receptor located in the cytoplasm or inside the nucleus. The hormone receptor complex will attach to the DNA, specifically the hormone response element. And when the hormone response element is activated by the hormone receptor complex, transcription, translation, physiologic response will happen or protein production. On the other hand, the hydrophilic hormones, being hydrophilic, cannot traverse the plasma membrane. Therefore, the hormone receptor complex in the plasma membrane generates second messengers to elicit physiologic response. The second messengers include cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP, calcium and phosphatidylinositides, and several other kinases. So let's talk about group 1 hormones first. Group 1 hormones are your steroid hormones, which also includes thyroid hormones and retinoic acid. The steroid hormones generally come from cholesterol. From cholesterol, after several processes, it will become progesterone. Progesterone will give out the mineralocorticoids, the glucocorticoids, and the androgens. The most potent mineralocorticoid is aldosterone, the most potent glucocorticoid is cortisol, and the most potent androgen is testosterone. After aromatization, this testosterone can become the estrogens that we all know, which is the hormone for women. This also includes calcitriol or the so-called vitamin D3 because this comes from a cholesterol derivative and also the retinoic acid and the thyroid hormones as I have mentioned earlier. Now, because they are lipophilic, they can traverse the plasma membrane. Let us look at the glucocorticoid hormone. The glucocorticoid hormone traversing the plasma membrane will find its way towards its receptor located in the cytoplasm. This receptor is rendered inactive by the molecular chaperone heat shock proteins. Once the hormone or the glucocorticoid hormone attaches to its receptor is activated, the heat shock protein is released, and the glucocorticoid hormone receptor complex is transported from the cytoplasm into the nucleus to find its way towards the glucocorticoid response element. The hormone receptor complex, once attached to the glucocorticoid response element, will stimulate transcription, translation, physiologic response after a co-activator protein attaches to it. On the other hand, let's look at the thyroid hormone. The thyroid hormone basically is different. Why? because the thyroid hormone, yes, can traverse the plasma membrane, but the receptors are not located in the cytoplasm. It is not located in the nucleus, but it's attached already in the thyroid response element of the DNA. The thyroid hormone, once it attaches to the thyroid receptor, will now activate transcription, translation, physiologic response, also requiring a co-activator protein, just like that of the glucocorticoid hormone. However, you may ask me, Doctor, what now stops this thyroid hormone from transcription before the thyroid hormone attaches to it? Now, the thyroid hormone receptor is inhibited from stimulating transcription by the co-repressor protein attached to it. When the thyroid hormone attaches to its receptor, the co-repressor protein is released and a co-activator protein is needed to be attached. This is what you have in physiology: lipophilic hormone, diffusion in the plasma membrane, hormone receptor complex, hormone receptor activated, transported to the nucleus, attaches to the hormone response element, transcription, translation, physiologic response happens. I would like to introduce the idea of dimerization. It is not just important that there is a hormone receptor complex. For these hormone receptor complexes to attach to the DNA, specifically the hormone response element, the hormone receptor complexes must be a dimer. There should be a pair of hormone receptor complexes to attach to the hormone response element so that physiologic response will happen. This is true for all steroid hormones, for T3, T4, calcitriol, and retinoic acid as well. All right, another application of what we just learned. So we have here a steroid hormone. This is transported by its transport protein to the target gland. Once in the target gland, it will cross the plasma membrane and it will find its way towards the cytoplasm where the receptor is waiting. The hormone receptor complex will now cross the plasma membrane and it will now attach to the DNA. The hormone receptor complex attaches to the hormone response element in the DNA, and once it attaches to the hormone response element, then there will be transcription, translation, physiologic response. Again, in the DNA region, which is known as the hormone response element, there will be activation of the production of the messenger RNA. The mRNA will now be interpreted by the ribosome to produce a specific protein. This is how a steroid hormone acts. Now, give me your favorite steroid hormone. Let's say, for example, your favorite steroid hormone is vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is transported by its transport protein into the gastrointestinal tract. In the gastrointestinal tract, it will cross the plasma membrane and it will find its way towards its receptor located in the cytoplasm. The vitamin D3 receptor complex will now traverse the nuclear membrane and it will find its way towards the DNA, the vitamin D3 response element. The vitamin D3 receptor complex will attach to the vitamin D3 response element, and this will now activate transcription, translation, physiologic response. Of course, the messenger RNA will first be produced, and when this messenger RNA is produced, the ribosome will now interpret the content of the messenger RNA. And since we're talking about vitamin D3 and we're talking about the gastrointestinal tract, the vitamin D3 will stimulate the production of the transport proteins for calcium, di ba? These are calcium transport proteins so that calcium will be actively absorbed from the lumen of the gastrointestinal tract into the circulatory system. So that ends my lecture on signal transduction. I know it's long. I hope I have given you a good lecture. Are there any questions? If there are any questions, I am going to answer them in our virtual class. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Today, we will talk about signal transduction. So that takes care of the discussion of group 1 hormones. How about group 2 hormones? Again, as I have mentioned, the group 2 hormones are hydrophilic. Being hydrophilic, it uses second messengers because the hormone receptor complex is located in the plasma membrane. Therefore, there will now be the signal. The hormone response element will now be at the plasma membrane and the signal will be received. Once the signal is received, there will be activation of several reactions so that physiologic response can happen. And Group 2 hormones will be using cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP, calcium and phosphatidylinositides, and kinases as second messengers. Let's talk about the first three first before we talk about the kinases. So in principle, we have here the several target glands, all right? And these target glands will have receptors located in the plasma membrane, and these receptors are associated with the green, the G protein. The hormone receptor complex will now activate the receptor, and when this receptor is activated, it is now able to activate the G protein via transfer of the phosphate molecule. In a relay race, we transfer something. In signal transduction, we transfer phosphate. And once a phosphate molecule is transferred, it will now activate an enzyme. This enzyme, represented by a violet sphere here, will now activate the production of the second messengers, the blue one. And once the second messengers are produced, these second messengers will activate kinases. Kinases will cause phosphorylation of a protein and or it can go into the nucleus and activate the genes. It can go to the nucleus and activate transcription, translation, physiologic response. Therefore, it is not just group 1 hormones that will activate transcription, but group 2 hormones can also activate transcription via the second messengers. So we have here a summary of how group 2 hormones work. These group 2 hormones are hydrophilic. They cannot traverse the plasma membrane. Therefore, its receptor is located in the plasma membrane. Once there is hormone receptor, ligand receptor, or stimulus receptor reception, then there will be several interactions inside. It will now produce second messengers like cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP, calcium, and phosphatidylinositide. How to do that? The receptor will activate the G protein. These proteins are associated with the receptor, thus the name G protein associated receptor. And when we have the G protein, it will activate enzymes. If the second messenger is cyclic AMP, the G protein will activate adenylate cyclase. For cyclic GMP, it will activate guanylate cyclase. And for calcium and phosphatidylinositide, it will activate phospholipase C. The end result is protein phosphorylation for physiologic response. And this protein phosphorylation is facilitated by protein kinases. In other words, we add a phosphate group to a protein, and when we add a phosphate group to this protein is activated. So, for us to activate protein kinase this is activated by the second messenger cyclic AMP. Second messenger cyclic GMP activates protein kinase G, and calcium and phosphatidyl inositide activates protein kinase C. Please remember this. Looking now at substances that uses cyclic AMP as the second messenger, the following are the substances that uses cyclic AMP as a second messenger. So, when we have cyclic AMP as a second messenger, what happens? The ligand will go to the receptor, and the receptor is located in the plasma membrane. Once the receptor is activated, it will now activate the G protein. The G protein will activate adenylate cyclase. Adenylate cyclase will convert ATP to cyclic AMP, and cyclic AMP will now activate protein kinase A. Protein kinase A has two regulatory subunits and two catalytic subunits. Once activated, the regulatory subunit is released, the catalytic subunit is activated. And this catalytic subunit will now cause protein phosphorylation or addition of a phosphate group into a protein, which exerts physiologic response. All right, let's try to use another diagram from another textbook. Um, what is your favorite hormone? Let's say, for example, this is glucagon. What is the purpose of glucagon? Remember, we have here glucose and we have glycogen. So that we enter the green pathway, which is the glycogenesis, we have to stimulate the glycogen synthase enzyme. So that we can enter the blue pathway, which is the glycogenolysis, we must stimulate the glycogen phosphorylase enzyme. So, which pathway is stimulated by glucagon? Glucagon stimulates the blue pathway. Therefore, it has to affect the glycogen phosphorylase enzyme. And how will glucagon do that? Glucagon will be stimulated by low levels of sugar. Hypoglycemia will stimulate the release of glucagon. Glucagon will now go to the hepatocyte, and in the hepatocyte, it will now attach to the G protein receptors. The G protein is activated, stimulate adenylate cyclase. Adenylate cyclase will increase levels of cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP will activate protein kinase. When this protein kinase is activated, it will now cause phosphorylation of a protein. It will cause phosphorylation of the phosphorylase enzyme, which is an enzyme necessary for glycogenolysis, thus increasing glucose. So this is the biochemistry of glucose in action. Or glucagon, hindi pala glucose, glucagon in action. We have here an illustration of the components of the G protein receptor. Of course, we have here the receptor. It is located in the membrane. It has transmembranal components, 7 components, and it is associated with the G protein. The G protein has an alpha, beta, and a gamma subunit. And this G protein, the alpha subunit specifically, is the one that will activate the enzyme. If cyclic AMP is the second messenger, we're talking about the adenylate cyclase here. So as you can see, as long as guanosine diphosphate is attached to the alpha subunit, the diphosphate renders it inactive. It needs an additional phosphate molecule, and when it becomes a guanosine triphosphate, then this alpha subunit is now active. But then, there is an inherent GTPase activity, an enzyme in the alpha subunit which converts the GTP to become guanosine diphosphate again. Why? Because we have to remove the phosphate molecule to end the physiologic response. This is an illustration that we have in physiologic obstetrics: receptor, G protein, alpha subunit with diphosphate, alpha subunit with triphosphate because the hormone receptor complex is active. Now the triphosphate now is active. Alpha subunit activates the adenylate cyclase. And when adenylate cyclase is activated, we produce cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP will activate protein kinase. One protein kinase is activated, phosphorylation of a protein happens. So let's look at another example. What other example if this? Okay, if we have here, okay, a while ago, glucagon, let's look at, for example, insulin this time. So again, the dogma: glycogen, glucose, glycogenesis, glycogenolysis. If the hormone here this time is insulin, the purpose of insulin in the hepatocyte is to increase glycogen, glycogenesis. The hormone, the enzyme that's important for glycogenesis is the glycogen synthase enzyme, and the enzyme that's responsible for glycogenolysis is glycogen phosphorylase enzyme. Now, we said a while ago that when we phosphorylate, okay, the phosphorylase enzyme, it is active. Okay? If this were glucagon muna, glucagon ulit. Therefore, glucagon will phosphorylate the phosphorylase enzyme, stimulating the increases in the level of glucose. At the same time, ladies and gentlemen, this glucagon will also phosphorylate the glycogen synthase enzyme. The glycogen synthase enzyme, to my mind, to my knowledge, is the only enzyme that when it is phosphorylated, it is inactive. Therefore, glucagon, when it acts on the hepatocyte, will phosphorylate both the phosphorylase enzyme and the glycogen synthase enzyme. However, when the phosphorylase is phosphorylated, it is active. When the glycogen synthase is phosphorylated, it is inactive. So let us change it. Let's look at this and let's make this one insulin. If this were insulin and this were the hepatocyte, then what will insulin do? Insulin will now activate dephosphorylation of the proteins. And when it dephosphorylates, it removes the phosphate from the phosphorylase enzyme. It is now inactive. And when it removes the phosphate group from the glycogen synthase enzyme, it is now rendered as active. Therefore, glycogenesis is stimulated. I hope I didn't confuse you there. Do we need some clarification? If not, then let's continue. All right, let's apply now what we've learned. So let me orient you first. This is the hormone. This is the receptor. This is going to be very quick. This is the G protein, the alpha subunit, the beta and the gamma subunit. This is adenylate cyclase. Remember, this is guanosine diphosphate. And when the hormone attaches to the receptor, this will now pass a phosphate molecule, making this one a triphosphate. Please watch closely because it's going to be very quick. So we have the hormone attached to the receptor, triphosphate now. Now the alpha subunit with the triphosphate will now activate the adenylate cyclase, and adenylate cyclase produces cyclic AMP from ATP. Look at this. It becomes inactive. Therefore, there is something in the alpha subunit or something in the adenylate cyclase. Wala siguro. There is something in the alpha subunit that removes a phosphate group from the guanosine triphosphate, thus making this guanosine diphosphate. And if this is diphosphate, then the alpha subunit is now inactive. Why? Because we want to stop physiologic response. Physiologic response doesn't happen forever. If this were insulin, and the purpose here of insulin is glycogenesis, we want glycogenesis to stop because we need some sugar in the blood so that the human body can function. Otherwise, there would be hypoglycemia, and with hypoglycemia, coma and death comes very, very near compared to hyperglycemia. When we talk about the adenylate cyclase system, please know that there is a stimulatory arm and an inhibitory arm. Substances like epinephrine, glucagon, and adenocorticotropic hormone activate the stimulatory arm. And when they activate the stimulatory arm, the alpha subunit will be activated, and this G protein will now activate the adenylate cyclase to produce a lot of cyclic AMP. On the other hand, substances like prostaglandin E1 and adenosine will now activate the inhibitory arm. Because it is activating the inhibitory arm, please take note that the inhibitory arm activation will cause inhibition of the release of cyclic AMP. Therefore, epinephrine, glucagon, and ACTH will increase cyclic AMP, whereas prostaglandin and adenosine will decrease cyclic AMP depending on which one is activated. Both activates both activates the G protein. These three activates the stimulatory G protein complex, whereas these two activates the inhibitory G protein complex, thus producing different effects. These are the substances that will inhibit the adenylate cyclase, and these are the hormones that will stimulate adenylate cyclase. Is it important to know this? Yes. I would like to introduce you to two toxins. We have here the cholera toxin and the pertussis toxin. The cholera toxin affects the alpha subunit of the G protein. We have mentioned that the alpha subunit is that subunit that receives a phosphate group. Therefore, when a phosphate group is added to it, the alpha subunit is activated. And when this is activated, it will activate the adenylate cyclase system, thus producing cyclic AMP. Therefore, protein kinase is activated. Cholera toxin ribosylates the alpha subunit. When you ribosylate the alpha subunit, what happens? It is frozen in its active state. Why? Normally, this alpha subunit will be broken down again, the phosphate group will be removed, and the alpha subunit, the G alpha, will have only a guanosine diphosphate attached to it. When the toxin causes ribosylation of this alpha subunit, then which process is inhibited? This process is inhibited. Therefore, the stimulatory arm is frozen, thus causing cholera, thus causing diarrhea or continued stimulation of the gastrointestinal tract. On the other hand, the pertussis toxin causes ribosylation of the alpha subunit of the inhibitory arm. Normally, we have here the inhibitory arm with the diphosphate. When it is activated, a triphosphate is attached to it. Okay, thus causing inhibition of adenylate cyclase. Therefore, no cyclic AMP is produced. The pertussis toxin, ladies and gentlemen, causes ribosylation of the alpha subunit. Normally, the alpha subunit can decrease the triphosphate so that it will become guanosine diphosphate. A phosphate group can be removed by the GTPase enzyme. Now, pertussis toxin causes ribosylation of that subunit, and when the subunit is ribosylated, therefore we inhibit the GTPase enzyme. So again, the inhibitory form is frozen. There is continuous inhibition of bronchodilation. Therefore, there is coughing, continuous, relentless coughing, a whooping cough in pertussis. Did you understand that? Both seems to stimulate, but both toxin will affect the different arm. Pertussis affects the inhibitory arm. Cholera affects the stimulatory arm. Right now, let me call on one of you. Are you under stress? Because you are stressed. This stress is sensed by the central nervous system, and the central nervous system sends signals to the adrenal medulla, and the adrenal medulla stimulates the secretion of epinephrine. Epinephrine is also known as adrenaline. The purpose of epinephrine is to increase glucose. Remember again the pathway. We have here glucose, we have here glycogen. The green, ladies and gentlemen, tells us to do glycogenesis via the activation of the glycogen synthase enzyme. The red tells you to do glycogenolysis via the activation of the phosphorylase enzyme. We know now that adrenaline and or also known as epinephrine will increase glucose. It is supposed to stimulate glycogenolysis by causing phosphorylation of the phosphatase enzyme, and it will inhibit glycogenesis by causing phosphorylation of the glycogen synthase enzyme. How? Because you are under stress, adrenaline, ladies and gentlemen, will stimulate the adenylate cyclase enzyme. This adenylate cyclase enzyme increases levels of cyclic AMP, and cyclic AMP will activate protein kinase A. Protein kinase is very powerful in phosphorylating certain proteins. One of the proteins that it will phosphorylate is the phosphorylase kinase, thus activating the phosphorylase enzyme. And when we activate the phosphorylase enzyme, we actually activate glycogenolysis, thus producing a lot of glucose. I think I have mentioned that when we switch on glycogenolysis, we have to switch off glycogenesis. And the same pathway is stimulated, the same adrenaline that stimulates cyclic AMP and protein kinase, that same protein kinase will now activate or will now phosphorylate glycogen synthase. And when we phosphorylate glycogen synthase, we said glycogen synthase is deactivated. Therefore, there will now be inhibition of glycogenesis. Therefore, the overall result is increases in glucose. This is what I mean by studying biochemistry. Don't study physiology in biochemistry. Don't stop at that illustration. This is what you need to know. So again, looking at this diagram, at this video, we have here the epinephrine. Epinephrine was released because you were stressed by Dr. Alenzuela calling you for recitation. Then we have here epinephrine activating its receptor located in the plasma membrane, receptor in the hepatocyte. The main goal in the hepatocyte is glycogenolysis. Now, epinephrine attaching to its receptor will activate the G protein. We said the G protein has three subunits, the alpha, the beta, and the gamma. The alpha subunit has the guanosine diphosphate, but when the receptor is activated, a phosphate group is transferred to the alpha subunit, making this time a guanosine triphosphate. And a guanosine triphosphate attached to the alpha subunit will activate adenylate cyclase. When we activate adenylate cyclase, this is now able to convert ATP to become cyclic AMP. And when we have four molecules of cyclic AMP, this cyclic AMP will now activate the phosphorylation of the phosphorylase enzyme. And this phosphorylase enzyme will now activate glycogenolysis, ang bagal. So we have here first the activation of protein kinase A, and once protein kinase A is activated, then we now have glycogenolysis, increases in levels of glucose. I hope that's very clear. So that ends my lecture on signal transduction. I know it's long. I hope I have given you a good lecture. Are there any questions? If there are any questions, I am going to answer them in our virtual class. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Today, we will talk about signal transduction. There are only two substances that uses cyclic GMP as a second messenger, and that's atrial natriuretic factor and nitric oxide. Nitric oxide, ladies and gentlemen, is a substance usually produced by the endothelial cell when there is endothelial injury or when there is a need for vasodilatation. Signaling substances will be sensed by receptors located in the plasma membrane, and this will now stimulate the release, of calcium from the endoplasmic reticulum or calcium influx. Thus, when there is increases in calcium, then the calcium calmodulin complex will stimulate the release of nitric oxide from the blood vessel. This nitric oxide will go into the vascular smooth muscle cell, and in the vascular smooth muscle cell, the nitric oxide will activate cyclic GMP to activate protein kinase G, and protein kinase G will cause phosphorylation of an enzyme, and this enzyme will now cause vasodilatation. The same thing is true for atrial natriuretic factor. Atrial natriuretic factor will be sensed by the vascular muscle cells, and when this is now secreted, it will stimulate the receptor. The receptor will also stimulate the guanylate cyclase enzyme to stimulate cyclic GMP, activate protein kinase G, and cause protein phosphorylation. Although we said two substances like nitric oxide and atrial natriuretic factor uses cyclic GMP as a second messenger, there are other substances that will also use cyclic GMP. One example here is light. Light, once perceived by the phytochrome, which is activated by the light, this will now cause the increases in the levels of cyclic GMP as a second messenger, and protein kinase G is activated. And once protein kinase G is activated, actually this will cause phosphorylation of transcription factors. Thus, transcription, translation, physiologic response will happen. At the same time, light does not only activate increases in levels of cyclic GMP, but it will also activate channels, calcium channels, thus allowing calcium influx. And once calcium is inside, then it will now activate protein kinase C. Protein kinase C will cause phosphorylation of transcription factors, transcription, translation, physiologic response. There are also many hormones that uses calcium or phosphatidylinositols or both as a second messenger. What happens? These hormones will activate the receptor located in the plasma membrane. The receptor will activate the G protein, and once the G protein is activated, it will activate phospholipase C, converting PIP2 to become diacylglycerol and IP3. Inositol triphosphate will act on the receptors located in the endoplasmic reticulum, thus increasing levels of cytosolic calcium. This cytosolic calcium will bind to calmodulin, and the calcium-calmodulin complex is also important. Just like protein kinases, calcium-calmodulin complexes also cause phosphorylation of certain proteins, and once phosphoproteins are formed, this will now cause physiologic response. Now, the diacylglycerol formed after the deduction of the PIP2 will now also activate the protein kinase C, which will also cause protein phosphorylation physiologic response. The G proteins will not only activate the phospholipase C but can also activate calcium channels that will allow calcium influx to support the increasing cytosolic needs for calcium so that calcium-calmodulin complexes are formed. So remember I said there will be membranal receptors, okay, that can open calcium gate channels. Like here in this video, we have the ligand. The ligand attaches to the receptor, and once the ligand is attached to the receptor, a phosphate group is added to the alpha subunit. The alpha subunit will now have the guanosine triphosphate. And when it is the guanosine triphosphate that is attached to the alpha subunit, calcium channels will now open. Remember, why do we need calcium? Calcium can be used as a second messenger because it will bind with calmodulin. And this calcium-calmodulin combination will cause changes in the cells, in the cellula, o diba? It will cause changes in the cells, specifically it will cause protein phosphorylation. Now, when the GTPase enzyme in the alpha subunit deactivates the alpha subunit, making it now G-diphosphate, this will now dissociate from the calcium channels, thus no more calcium influx in the membrane will happen. This is another illustration. We have here the second messengers, the hormone or the ligand attaching to the receptor associated with the G protein receptors activating phospholipase C, thus converting PIP2 to become diacylglycerol and IP3. Inositol triphosphate will now attach to the receptors in the endoplasmic reticulum, thus increasing cytosolic calcium. Calcium will now bind with calmodulin, and the calcium-calmodulin complexes will now cause protein phosphorylation physiologic response. This is what you have in physiologic obstetrics. We have the hormone, the receptor, the G protein, phospholipase C, PIP2 becoming diacylglycerol and IP3, IP3 in the plasmic reticulum, calcium plus calmodulin. Okay, diacylglycerol will attach or will activate protein kinase C. Once protein kinase C is activated, protein phosphorylation is a stimulated physiologic response. In another textbook, We have here the hormone, the receptor. We have here the G protein, alpha subunit. Okay, with the guanosine triphosphate, phospholipase C is activated. Then we now have the production of diacylglycerol and inositol triphosphate from PIP2. Inositol triphosphate attaches to the receptor in the endoplasmic reticulum, increasing levels of calcium. At the same time, diacylglycerol will activate protein kinase C. Protein kinase C will cause phosphorylation of a protein physiologic response. Calcium will bind to calmodulin, and the calcium calmodulin complex will also cause protein phosphorylation. Now, the calcium calmodulin complexes, okay, substances that will use calcium calmodulin, calcium for second messenger, can also affect glycogenolysis in the skeletal muscle. Number one, those that will stimulate calcium calmodulin complexes will activate the protein kinase C, and once protein kinase C is activated, phosphorylation of the phosphorylase enzyme happens. We have activation of glycogenolysis, thus increasing glucose. On the other hand, the same calcium calmodulin complexes will now activate the phosphorylation of the glycogen phosphor synthase enzyme, and when glycogen synthase is phosphorylated, you inhibit glycogenesis. So end result would be increases in levels of glucose. Ma'am, do I need to memorize? The answer is yes. Very easy. Only two substances uses cyclic GMP as a second messenger, plus light. Okay? Next. Now, these are the substances that uses cyclic AMP as a second messenger. It looks intimidating, but it really is not. There's a way to remember this. Cyclic AMP, adrenergic catecholamines, alpha-2 and beta. Remember, human chorionic gonadotropin, TSH, LH, and FSH are brothers and sisters. Why? They have two subunits. They have similar alpha subunit. The difference is in the beta subunit. How to remember? Beta HCG. Probably all of you has heard about beta HCG. So-called beta because the beta subunit differs from the alpha. Brothers and sisters, HCG, TSH, LH, and FSH. Therefore, because they are brothers and sisters, they interact. They have the same second messengers, they interact with each other. When you learn about the endocrine system in physiology, you will hear about the hypothalamic pituitary peripheral gland axis. The hypothalamus will be releasing hormones. These peripheral glands will be releasing steroid hormones, and only two glands will release steroid hormones: the adrenal gland and the testes or the ovaries. Isa lang, you can't have testes and ovaries. So as far as the adrenal gland is concerned, the adrenal gland releases corticotropin releasing hormone, and in response, the pituitary gland will release the adrenocorticotropic hormone. Therefore, the adrenal glands will be producing the mineralocorticoids, the glucocorticoids, and the androgens. So it is the adrenal gland production that uses cyclic AMP as a second messenger. Doctor, how about that for the testes and the ovary? It's going to be calcium already. Let's just wait. There are three hormones that are important for calcium metabolism: calcitonin, parathyroid hormone, and vitamin D3. Calcitonin and parathyroid hormone uses cyclic AMP as a second messenger. How about vitamin D3? What is the second messenger of vitamin D3? In anatomy, you learn that there are three hormones coming from the pancreas: insulin, glucagon, and somatostatin. Glucagon and somatostatin uses cyclic AMP as a second messenger. How about insulin? Anything that is involved in growth uses kinase as a second messenger, nakakainase. How about calcium and phosphatidylinositide? Again, intimidating? No. Muscarinic receptors and the alpha-1 adrenergic catecholamines. Two substances released in the posterior pituitary gland, the antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Two substances important in the gastrointestinal tract, cholecystokinin and gastrin. We also talked about the releasing hormones. Remember, we mentioned about the hypothalamic pituitary peripheral gland axis. The testes and the ovaries will be secreting GnRH. The GnRH, mali. The GnRH will come from the hypothalamus. Now, in response, the pituitary gland will be releasing LH and FSH. And the peripheral gland will be the testis or the ovary. Another releasing hormone from the thyroid gland will be the thyrotropin releasing hormone. The thyrotropin releasing hormone will attach or stimulate the pituitary gland to release TSH, and eventually this will release T3 and T4. So these three, what are the second messengers? Cyclic AMP, the brothers and sisters. Easy, right? And one more thing. I think I've mentioned that anything that is involved in growth, okay? Anything that is involved in growth uses kinase as a second messenger, nakakainase, except platelet-derived growth factor. So that ends my lecture on signal transduction. I know it's long. I hope I have given you a good lecture. Are there any questions? If there are any questions, I am going to answer them in our virtual class. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Good day, everyone. Welcome to my virtual class. Because platelet-derived growth factor uses two second messengers, kinase and also calcium. So, chorionic somatomamotropin, epidermal growth factor, erythropoietin is for the growth of the RBC in the bone marrow, fibroblast growth factor, growth hormone, growth. These protein kinases are not new to you. Remember, we have here the plasma membrane receptor. We have here the hormone, and then it will activate the G protein. The G protein will also activate the enzyme. Okay? Once the enzyme is activated, this enzyme will activate the production of the second messengers, cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP, or calcium and phosphatidylinositides. And these second messengers will activate protein kinases, protein kinase A, protein kinase G, protein kinase C, and even the calcium calmodulin complexes. So we see these protein kinases are very far. And once we have these protein kinases, these are very important because it causes the phosphorylation of proteins, specifically the serine and the threonine residues of the target proteins. What is now the difference in the hormones that will use kinase as a second messenger? The hormones that use kinase as a second messenger have an intrinsic kinase activity in the receptors already, and they preferentially phosphorylate the tyrosine residues. Once these are stimulated, then several things will happen. It can either activate the kinase cascades or it can activate the JAK-STAT pathway. Insulin, epidermal growth factor, and insulin-like growth factor 1 activates the kinase cascades, and growth hormone, prolactin, erythropoietin, and cytokines stimulate the JAK-STAT pathway. Let's take insulin for example. Insulin activates a cascade of pathways using this kinase. Now, as we have mentioned, the receptors of insulin has an intrinsic kinase activity. When insulin attaches to the receptor, it phosphorylates the tyrosine residues. And once these tyrosine residues are phosphorylated, it is now able to phosphorylate the insulin receptor substrates 1 and 4, 1 to 4, and when this is phosphorylated, the cascade pathways are stimulated. One pathway that would be stimulated would be the SOS pathway, or the growth factor receptor binding protein to mammalian sons of 7-less pathway, eventually causing cell growth, DNA synthesis, and early response gene activation. Another pathway is the activation of the mTOR, or the mammalian target of rapamycin. This mTOR eventually will stimulate several other kinases in the ribosome, which will cause protein translocation, stimulate the enzyme activity, and activate gene transcription. Also, these insulin receptor substrate will also activate phosphatase tensine homologs, and this phosphatase tensine homolog eventually will again activate a protein-dependent kinases, eventually protein translocation, increases in enzyme activity, and gene transcription. Therefore, insulin involved in growth can also activate gene transcription. So if we are to recall, we have here the insulin receptors, and the insulin receptors are dimers. The insulin will attach to each receptor, and once the insulin receptor is stimulated, then the tyrosine residues are stimulated. We said these tyrosine residues are stimulated and they are easily given phosphate molecules. Of course, the phosphate molecule comes from ATP. And once these tyrosine residues are phosphorylated, it is now able to freely transfer phosphate molecules from the receptor to the insulin receptor substrates. And when the insulin receptor substrates are activated, several cascade fat pathways are activated so that the insulin response can be seen. This is another pathway seen in the Kuhlmann Color Atlas of Biochemistry. Okay, so we said insulin will stimulate signal transduction. There are two things. Okay, insulin promotes glycogenesis. From glucose, glycogen has to be produced. Okay. Therefore, there are two requirements for insulin to do that in the hepatocyte. The first requirement is the entry of glucose in the hepatocyte, and the second requirement would be the activation of the glycogen synthase enzyme. Okay, so how will insulin do that? Insulin will attach to the receptor. The insulin receptor is phosphorylated and it will now phosphorylate the insulin receptor substrate. It can also, once the insulin receptor substrates are phosphorylated, we said it will activate certain kinases. And when these kinases are activated, it will activate the phosphoinositide dependent kinase. These phosphoinositide dependent kinase actually will activate, okay, the GLUT transporter 4 so that glucose uptake will happen. Therefore, check. We need glucose. Check. We have now glucose. The second thing that insulin will do once these insulin receptor substrates are stimulated is to go to a pathway where it will now stimulate the phosphoprotein phosphatase. These phosphoprotein phosphatases removes the phosphate molecule from the glycogen synthase. And when the phosphate molecule is removed from the glycogen synthase, it is now activated. Therefore, you now have the second requirement. Therefore, entonces, glycogenesis can happen. Aside from this, we have mentioned that activation of the insulin receptor substrate will also activate several other kinases, and these kinases will cause phosphorylation of transcription factors, transcription, translation, physiologic response. That's how wonderful the cascade system activated by insulin is. So the cascade pathway stimulates transcription. The JAK-STAT pathway also stimulates transcription. How? Now the receptors have this term Janus kinase. These Janus kinases are also easily phosphorylated. And once phosphorylated, these phosphate molecules will be transferred by JAK to STAT to the signal transducers and activators of transcription. And once it is done, then it will now activate transcription, translation, physiologic response. So we have here again the Janus kinase receptors, and it will activate the STAT, the signal transducers and activators of transcription. The STAT will have to be a dimer because once it is a dimer, this STAT can now go to the DNA to attach to the response element, the hormone response element that will stimulate the transcription. Therefore, hormones that use kinase as a second messenger can activate gene transcription as well. This is what you have in physiologic obstetrics. This time it is leptin, Janus kinase, phosphorylated. It will activate the STAT, and the STAT will become a dimer. STAT goes in the DNA, transcription, translation, physiologic response. So what happens with the erythropoietin? Okay, this is what's going to happen at the cellular level. Todo na ito. We have here erythropoietin. Erythropoietin is secreted by the kidneys upon detection of anemia. And when anemia is detected, erythropoietin goes to its receptors located in the bone marrow. In the bone marrow, the receptors are dimers as well, and the receptors have Janus kinases. And because it has Janus kinases, the Janus kinase molecules are easily phosphorylated. And because this is easily phosphorylated, it can also easily transfer phosphate molecules. It will preferentially transfer phosphate molecules to the STAT, the signal transducers and activators of transcription. This STAT will have to be a dimer too. Okay, we need a pair, and once it is now a dimer, it can cross the nuclear membrane. Why? Because its target is the DNA. In the DNA, which it will hopefully reach. There you go. Thus, past the nuclear membrane, it will now reach the DNA so that gene transcription, translation, physiologic response will happen. And what is the expected physiologic response of erythropoietin in the bone marrow? That would be production of the RBC. Did I say that group 2 hormones do not affect transcription? My response is no. Yes, group 1 hormones will directly affect gene transcription via the hormone receptor complex. But ladies and gentlemen, group 2 hormones will also affect gene transcription. Hormones that will use cyclic AMP as a second messenger can stimulate transcription. Hormones that use cyclic GMP as a second messenger can affect transcription. And also hormones, not just those that uses STAT, but hormones that uses the kinase pathway can also affect transcription. Can I summarize signal transduction? Yes, I can. All I need are 2 slides. There are 2 groups of hormones. We have the lipophilic hormones and we have the hydrophilic hormones. The lipophilic hormones will use the hormone receptor complexes to promote the physiologic response, whereas the hydrophilic hormones will use second messengers to promote physiologic response. Among the second messengers, if the substance uses cyclic AMP as a second messenger, the hormone receptor activation will lead to activation of the the G protein to stimulate adenylate cyclase, therefore producing cyclic AMP, and cyclic AMP will activate protein kinase A to activate enzymes by modulation, by phosphorylation, and by regulation. Also, cyclic AMP response element can also affect transcription via the CREB. And when the CREB is stimulated, then the cyclic AMP response element is occupied, transcription, translation happens. If the substance uses cyclic GMP as a second messenger, the G protein will activate guanylate cyclase. Guanylate cyclase produces cyclic GMP to activate protein kinase G. Protein modification, enzyme modification will also cause cytoskeleton protein phosphorylation. Plus, the cyclic GMP can also directly cause phosphorylation of transcription factors, also affecting the gene. Next, for those who uses cyclic calcium and phosphatidyl inositides as a second messenger, they will activate phospholipase C, activate protein kinase C, modulate the enzyme, causing protein phosphorylation. It will also activate the calcium calmodulin. The calcium calmodulin complexes can activate protein kinases that can also activate several transcriptional factors. And finally, we have the fourth second messenger, those hormones or those substances that uses an intrinsic tyrosine kinase, either activating a cascade or activating the JAK-STAT pathway. Either way, it ends up with stimulation of transcription, translation, physiologic response. So that ends my lecture on signal transduction. I know it's long. I hope I have given you a good lecture. Are there any questions? If there are any questions, I am going to answer them in our virtual class. Thank you very much and have a nice day.